So anyway, without further ado, I would like to read this little deal here about Noe, Torres, and Ruben Uriarte. In 1955, some very strange happenings about 50 miles from here, where we sit today. A witness, retired Air Force Colonel Robert Burton Willingham, says he chased a UFO in his F-86 and watched it fall to Earth just northwest of here. In 2007, Colonel Willingham finally told his story to UFO investigators Noe, Torres, and Ruben Uriarte, who wrote the book, The Other Roswell, the UFO Crash on the Texas-Mexican border. Today, Noe and Ruben will bring us the complete story of what happened, including all the latest data about the reported UFO crash not far from right here. Actually, to kind of put it in a better perspective, it's over where the Pegasus River runs into the Rio Grande. So, anyway, with that, welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Al.
I'm Noe and this is Ruben, in case you have trouble differentiating.
We're twins, we're twins.
But we're joined at the hip, sort of. And actually, Brad is too modest. He is the third creator of the Border Zone festivals. Brad gave the political know-how and the oomph that was necessary to end up having 5 different festivals in 5 different Texas border cities. So Brad gave us all the ins and outs on how to approach folks in the various communities and offer to do something to enhance tourism in their area, as well as bring good information about the investigations that we and other UFO researchers have been doing. So we've had such a great time over the past 5 years. We spent a lot of time with the big shots in UFO circles, Stanton Friedman, Travis Walton, many other people. Nick Pope is one of our regular speakers, Jim Mars, whom you listened to last night, and his presentation on ancient aliens, the conspiracy to withhold the truth about ancient civilizations and ancient contacts with extraterrestrials in our society, is going to astonish you this afternoon. And then, of course, we've got someone you may have heard of, George Norrie, will be with us. We're going to start our presentation. I don't know if there's a way to slightly dim those lights that are reflecting a little bit on the screen, but if not, that's okay. I just thought I'd mention that to our wonderful guys up in the control booth. They have been very helpful. I told Ruben that the last couple of times that we've done this presentation, I have like dominated all the talking, and I feel bad because Ruben then becomes sort of the silent partner, but he has so much to contribute. He has over 30 years of experience in UFO investigations. I'm more the author part of it and the researcher. He's more the actual boots on the ground guy that goes and stands in the middle of crop circles. He's been all over the world investigating UFO sightings and other paranormal events. He's been on TV. I call him Mr. Hollywood. He lives in the Bay Area in California, and we don't get to see each other very much, so we cherish the time together at these festivals where we both speak. But today, you are going to have the rare treat where Ruben is going to be doing most of the presentation, and I'll be his color commentary guy, you know, like at the football games. So I'll hop in and promise me, Ruben, that you won't let me go on talking too long, you know, just kind of shove me over. Before I start this, let me just preface it by saying that we're going to talk about a reported UFO crash about 50 miles from here, as Brad mentioned, right across the Rio Grande River from Landry, Texas. And it happened in 1955. Now, there had been kind of this information that was out there that something had happened along the Texas-Mexico border. There had been a UFO incident. A lot of people knew about it, but back then, information about UFO cases did not travel much beyond the investigators who were working on it. We knew that people like Leonard Stringfield, who was a pioneer in UFO research in the 60s and 70s, knew about it. J. Allen Hynek, a lot of the big shots in the 60s knew about an incident on the Texas-Mexico border involving a downed UFO. It was also, there were some works of fiction and literature that kind of hinted at something happening on the border. Ruben and I have a favorite scene from a 1962 TV show that Rod Serling wrote the screenplay for. Rod Serling, as you know, was the creator of Twilight Zone, and he was very much in the know about actual events that had happened, paranormal events that had happened, and he wrote a lot of stories about UFOs and extraterrestrials. So here is from a video clip from the 1962 episode from the original Twilight Zone series called The Gift, about a UFO crash on the Texas-Mexico border.
We are at present 40 miles from the Rio Grande, but any place and all places can be the Twilight Zone.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Noe. This has been one of our favorite clips, but who would have thought that we would actually be sharing with you what Rod Sterling was talking about, a UFO crash that happened 40 miles from the Texas border. In our research, both Noe and I have been concentrating on UFO crashes. Mysteriously, a number of them that have been crashing along the U.S.-Mexican border, particularly in the state very close to the Texas border. So we're going to be presenting to you some documents, our interviews with Dr. Colonel Willingham, Colonel Willingham, and share with you some of our findings. It's still not concrete. In this case, it's still open. We're still coming across new documents. Some people or other colleagues have their points of view. Some feel that that he might be, it may not be accurate. But what we feel is this case is still open, and we want to share that in our books and give this presentation on this important event that happened here near Del Rio.
Let me just add, Ruben mentioned other UFO researchers who have different viewpoints on Colonel Willingham's testimony. He has pretty much stuck to his story with a couple of minor points. For example, the type of aircraft that he was flying. Because he told us, well, at the time I was flying several different types of aircraft, the F-84s and the F-86s. So in his original testimony, he mentioned, I believe, an F-84, right?
F-94.
F-94, I'm sorry, which was a variant of the F-86. So when we interviewed him, and we interviewed him over many, many months before our book was published, which our book is essentially completely his story, that he told us that over the years that he's had time to think about what happened that day, he's pretty certain now that it was an F-86 that he was flying, not an F-94. So then the critics latch on the fact that in his original testimony to NICAP that he gave, that he said it was an F-94, and now he's saying an F-86, you know, so they're attacking his credibility based on some memory gaps, admittedly, that he had there. But like Ruben said, different researchers have different viewpoints on this, and but we don't necessarily take a position either way. In our book, we tell the Colonel's story, and we leave it up to the reader to decide its veracity. We don't really take a position in our books. We present the evidence as it's presented to us by the witnesses, by the documents, and we leave it up to you all to decide. We think it's a credible case. We spent many hours in Colonel Willingham's home in North Texas. We visited with him across his dining room table. We looked the man in the eye for hours, and we felt that he was credible and that he had no motivation. He refused to accept any sort of compensation of any kind from the publication of our books. He did not ask us for anything to tell his story. So we felt the man was credible and the story was credible, and that's why we wrote the book.
Thank you, Noe. We'll go on. The information that he shared with us, he was a captain in the United States Air Force Reserve, born August 15, 1926, in Holiday, Texas. He served in World War II with the Army's 82nd Airborne. He was part of the 280 combat engineers. He also served under General Patton, participated in post-war reconstruction of Berlin. He later transferred to the United States Air Force in 1950 for the Korean War. He flew P-51 Mustangs in Korea until he was wounded in December of 1950. And then this is his story, which goes back to his date that this particular event happened in 1955. He was flying an air combat mission where they, we looked in there.
There's audio there.
Oh, there is, okay, go ahead. We have an audio clip with this, where he just tells his story.
Oh, it's after this.
Oh, okay.
You want to set the scene?
Yes, during that time, there were a number of exercises being conducted by Strategic Air Command, And normally, when they fly over, they do these exercises during the Cold War, simulating air warfare, and particularly flying over the Southwest as they are coming in and bombing simulated cities that in the Soviet Union at that time. And normally they would have a fighter escort, and Willingham was a part of that, where they flew close to a group of B-47 bombers. Let's see if we can get the audio.
I just want to make a note. The purple in this map is the route of the bombers. The bomber being escorted by the F-86s going from Fort Worth down to El Paso. And it was right around north of here that they encountered this strange light that looked like a very bright light close up in the daytime, as we're going to hear in a moment in the Colonel's own words.
Yeah, we were in Texas. The aircraft we were flying cook for was out of New York. It's B-52 flying cook for. And B-47, we were going across there, and one of the bomber pilots called me and said, "What is that you see up in front of us there? About another 20 degrees. And I looked up there, and great big, looked like stars, And I said, "No, that's not no star." And about that time, they made a 90-degree turn to the right, and doing about 2,000 miles an hour. And I knew that wasn't no airplane.
Okay, so we're describing about the bright object that was flying over close to the air group, made that turn, and it was heading toward the Mexican border, it was descending.
I was thinking at the time they did that there was somebody that supposed to Oregon somewhere or Washington had come on the radio and said that. I don't believe they were talking to my people I was with. That came a little late, and they asked about, "Are you saying?" And that's when the B-47 pilot said, "Yes, we've got contact with her." Yeah, and then all at once they made that 90-degree turn and took off.
As he was flying, then he was following a bright light. He was following the bright light, and then he noticed that as it was descending, it was flying over the border, and later it crashed. So we have his testimony in our interview.
Well, it kind of looked like at first, like a star, but it just was closer. Sorry, real bright light in color. There was a little amber-looking color in it there once, or I thought it was, because I didn't high off there. Yeah, just a very bright, and I see before it made the 90-degree turn, it would look like it was that big to me right there, but there's no telling, it might have been 40 miles back from where somewhere, or 80, you never know.
So, go ahead.
Ruben, if you will tell folks, you've got over 30 years experience in investigating UFOs. One of the characteristics is a non-ballistic motion, where they're zigging and zagging all over the sky. The human body could not take the stresses of the aircraft making such sudden changes, right?
Exactly the way you described, especially during that time that we're looking at back in the 50s. We did not have, of course, the technology that we do now back then, where they could make these abrupt changes at a rapid velocity. So this would struck him that was very odd. He says, "We have nothing like that during the time that when I was in the Air Force."
And about that time, they made a 90-degree turn to the right, and doing about 2,000 miles an hour. And I knew that wasn't no airplane. And over a little bit, and I said, "When we get in here, I'm going to go look at that." And so they went on to Washington, state of Washington, and there was a fighter escort And then I got a small plane and went down there where that thing looked like it crashed.
So now he's going to be flying over that area to examine the crash.
I seen one of his kids while I was flying, and I told the commander I was going to fly over it and come back. They said, okay, yeah, we won't know what it was. So I flew over there and looked over it, and I got out about 800 feet. You're not allowed to do that, you know. And anyway, I get in the road and see what I want to see. And do that, come on back and fix my B-46 with this going on to St. Washington. And I took him out there, I got to get down here and go on.
This is hard to hear, so nice.
So basically, as he flew over the crash, he had permission to do that. Later on, what he noticed he was low on fuel, and then he returned back to his air base, and then he flew back in a small airplane with another gentleman, Perkins, one of his engineers, and he flew back to the crash scene, and he actually landed on the Rio Grande River, and so he's going to continue with his story about his observations.
He was coming across there, he made a 90-degree turn at 2,000 miles an hour through a lot of sparks for the way, and it tilted down by a 45-degree angle till it hit the ground.
One interesting thing about Colonel Willingham is we went back and looked at the original testimony he gave as far back as the 1960s, and we compared it with what he told us over the course of many months, and everything is exactly the same. I mean, except for a few minor details, like I mentioned, the type of aircraft he was flying, that the critics have really latched onto. The core of his story has remained unchanged. And he told people from the beginning, another thing that critics have latched onto is the date, his confusion in the dates. He told investigators, UFO investigators, very early on in the 60s that he did not recall the exact date that this incident happened. He told Ruben and me, we were sitting at his dining room table there in North Texas, and just outside of Wichita Falls. He lived in Archer City at that time. He told us that, he said, man, this whole thing took place in just a couple of hours of my life, many, many years ago. So, you know, the exact date that it happened eludes me, but he's fairly certain that it was in 1955. But he told investigators, as I mentioned early on, he didn't have an exact date that he could tell them, but some dates were assigned to this by UFO investigators that he had nothing to do with claiming that it happened on that date. And that's why, another reason that his story is often criticized by various UFO researchers, including our friend...
Which one? Let's go move on.
we won't mention it.
The river comes up there within, I'd say, 3/4 or a mile back toward Judge Roy Bean's place. And it was just about 100 feet on the other side of the river.
So this is very close to where, that area there, where Judge Roy Bean in Lang Creek. And this is on the U.S. side of the border, and that's about the point of impact that he told us where the UFO had crashed.
If you go out there, and we're hoping to go out there before this weekend is over, there's a high plateau. There's a high plateau. If you stand here at this loop right on the edge of the river and look across, there's a high plateau, kind of a cliffs right here, and then there's a flat area up on top. Colonel Willingham, we were in his home, on his TV, we were showing him satellite maps that I had pre-recorded because he didn't have internet in his home and didn't know how to use it. But we zoomed in on Google Maps and showed him, and he pinpointed this location right here as being where he set down his aircraft. And this is where he saw all the wreckage and the debris. This is a Google Maps zoom in flyover of the area. And through the magic of the internet, you too can do your own zoom ins. There's this strange pattern there in the soil that still exists today.
I went back and put my aircraft up, went over to the CA pick place, got one of their little light planes, and we put this down there. Like a rock. No lights, no radio, no that. It was just a simple airplane. We were lucky to get it back in those days too.
So these were the simple little planes that they were flying. He mentioned CAP, Civil Air Patrol, and he was also connected with them. Again, this was a very lightweight airplane with no instrumentation, and so this is what they used to fly back to the crash site.
I'd say there was probably a platoon of them, enlisted type, and the rest of them were government and officers. And there was about 15 or 20 of us. And yeah, they were just looking at everything because it was still red hot. And they were staying back pretty close. I told one of them, I said, they better not drive a hole into that. That's still red hot.
When he got out of his airplane, both him and Mr. Perkins, they found that the crash site was already surrounded by Mexican soldiers, and they already had a security ring around them. One of the interesting things that he shared with Noe was the fact that the crash site was still smoldering. There was still some flames and smoke, but it was getting very cold, as we're dealing with the cold today. And what he did was, he noticed that there was one Mexican soldier putting a warm blanket right over one of the pieces of the wreckage where it was still hot, and then he would grab and wrap it around. And he said, I don't think that's a good idea. That thing may be radioactive. That was his concern. So it was a little side point that I got a kick out of listening to that.
He also told us that at another place of the impact zone, there was some smoldering wreckage, and some of the soldiers were just warming their hands over the red hot pieces of metal. Yeah, he drew this.
This is actual drawing, and Noe was able to add in the additional information to point of impact, but the wreckage.
We put the labels in, but this is his drawing.
Yeah, we used to put, as we mentioned, we put in the labels. But there you see the river where his airplane landed approximately, and then the perimeter of the soldiers according to the crash site.
Let me just mention there was this skid path or furrow in the ground where he felt that the object had impacted, and then it had gone skidding along here, and then the wreckage, the debris field was mostly in this large circle here, but then the major part of it, what we would call the cockpit, ended up over here where this exit is. Colonel Willingham said that the Mexican soldiers were waiting for the U.S. Air Force to arrive. So apparently there had been some coordination there. What Ruben and I have felt was most likely the case is we had a lot of experimental rockets that went into northern Mexico, both before and after this incident. So the story that the U.S. was going to recover a downed experimental craft or missile could have been used as a justification to coordinate with the Mexican government to go in and recover the U.S. down hardware, or so the cover story was. So right around here was the initial bounce point, according to Willingham. The Mexican vehicles, when he arrived, were parked here in this area. And so they were just waiting for the U.S. Air Force to arrive. An interesting point.
We have some other interesting videos and interviews of Willingham's experience, so we'll move on to the next there.
We're talking with Colonel Willingham about a day in 1955 that is utterly extraordinary. And the story is all the more extraordinary because he lived it, he was in the Air Force, he is telling the story now. And there are so many people in the military who know things, see things, experience things, participate in things, who take it with them. This is one of the men who did not do that, and we are eminently and eternally grateful for this information. All right, Colonel Willingham, if you would, sir, please take it from the top. 1955, what was happening on that day when this whole thing began to unroll?
We were assigned to a wingtip watch over 47 that left up in New York, came down through Oklahoma and down to Uriarte County and back over and went to head to El Paso, and we were supposed to fly cover for it.
Now, when you say a 47, are you talking about a B-47?
Yes.
Okay. And why were you flying cover for a B-47?
Then I wasn't told why I was supposed to. It just told to do it.
I'll bet you were just told to do it. Could it possibly be that that B-47 was carrying a certain something in its bomb bay?
It could have had.
Okay.
Pretty heavy one too, I think.
Just fishing.
Okay.
All right, so you're flying cover. You and how many fellow pilots?
Four of us.
Four of us, all right.
Four of us and about.
Were you boxing?
Four.
Out of four, were you boxing them in front and rear and side to side?
Yeah, that's exactly.
All right, I got the picture now. B-47, for any of you who want to know, can simply type in B-47, the numerals, on any search engine. You'll see a picture of this jet bomber, which was carrying obviously a very special cargo at that time on that day. All right, sir, go right ahead.
We fly along there, and my buddy back there said on my unicorn between the aircraft. He said, "Hey, here's that big star falling, or whatever what it is over there." And I looked at it, and everybody else looked at it, and I said, "You sure that's a star?" I said, "It looks to me like it's something else." And it was real bright. Finally, it made a 90-degree turn at 2,000 miles an hour, and I didn't figure it was.
Well, shooting stars and meteorites don't change course. Not like that.
That's right. So I asked Captain on 47 if I could trace it, see where it was going, but we didn't know what it was. He came back a few minutes, he said, "Yeah, go ahead, just shoot though, not the rest of it." So I took off that there, and when I got to where it was right below Lane 3 Texas, over on the Mexican side.
That thing actually just took an absolute flat-on-out 90-degree change in direction at 2,000 miles an hour, leaving a contrail of some kind behind it.
Right.
That must have just knocked your eyeballs.
It sure did. I'm hoping to have one by the next year that I could fly myself.
Spoken like a true aviator hero. That's great. All right, so it makes a 90-degree turn. At that point, did it begin to descend below your flight altitude?
Yeah, sure did. We fly along about 35,000 at that time. I took off after it, and it all hit. It's about the time I got about halfway there.
Okay, it dropped below you.
And then I had to kind of circle around. And that time, the Mexican government had started started sending in their troops over.
All right, so by the time you took your 5 to 8 minutes to drop down to get close to the deck to see this thing, which you could tell, I guess, from before you got there, had come in for some kind of an impact landing.
Well, I don't think it was trying to land. I think it already lost control of it.
I see.
Or that was my idea.
Mm-hmm. As you're coming down toward the Rio Grande River, and you're coming down, and this thing is on the ground, as you approach it, what do you see exactly?
I just seen where it hit about 100 yards up from the water bank, and kind of bounced a few times, and just kept on going. I'd say it went out through there about 1,000 yards.
Did you actually see it, Colonel, hit the ground?
Well, I didn't actually see it hit the ground. I seen it when it finally got stopped. I had got that close.
I see.
I could see it.
Uh-huh.
But it was breaking up pretty bad there when I seen it.
Now you're flying your F-86 down, you see the object on the ground. It had been down for no more than maybe 30 seconds by the time you flew over it, something like that?
That's right. I made one circle around it.
All right.
And looked it over, and then I headed back to my job after the B-47. Yes.
All right, so you had to climb way back up to 35,000 feet or thereabouts to assume your position in that box formation of security around the B-47 bomber.
Well, the bomber had already nearly got to El Paso.
All right.
And they're going to take another team to fly a wing for it on to Arizona.
Okay, understand.
So they called and told me, said, no, you going back to the base, and you want to go out there and look at that anyway. And I said, yes, I do. So I took mine and went on back, and about 5 minutes after I was there, maybe 10, the rest of them came on in. And
the other three squadron mates, okay.
Yeah, that's where we were stationed at the Carswell Air Force Base.
All right, Carswell, yeah, all right. When you flew back to Carswell, checked your F-86 in, and then went back to the crash location of this disc you had seen come down to Earth and hit the deck about 100 yards from the Rio Grande River. We'll do that.
Well, I sure like to get some cripple of the tank, too.
Yeah, all right. You hang on. This is a great story.
I'll tell you about that in a minute. Yeah, parked the car. I got the car and went down to Torres, where I used to fly out of that base down there.
All right.
And picked up a light aircraft and flew down to where the crash was. So I went on down there, found a place to clean it up so I could sit down.
Uh-huh.
And I sat down, and
did you have any trouble finding the location of the crash from the air? You remembered it pretty clearly, I guess.
yes, I did. I still got it right in my mind right now.
All right.
You just go from Lane through Texas,
Okay.
right straight to the river, and just on the other side of it was where it is.
All right. You landed how close to the crash itself?
I'd say I was about 150, 200 yards.
That's damn close. Okay, when you got there, what did you see?
Well, I started up there, and here come all these Spanish soldiers coming running over, and they were all armed. And I put up my hands like being arrested, you know, or something.
Really? Were you still in uniform?
Yeah, I'm still in my flight suit.
Could you see
And
the
the
craft?
it was on both sides.
All right. Could you see the craft itself?
Yeah. I went in there and I talked to this Spanish lieutenant. Anyway, I talked to him, and we walked down down through there, and he said, I never seen anything like it before. And I said, no, I haven't either. But I said, this fact's a little different than some I looked at.
All right, so the lieutenant gets there. You walk up to the craft itself. How close did you get to it, Colonel?
I walked right up and kicked a piece of it.
This has been one of Jeff Rentz's most popular episodes ever, he's told us, and people still download it and listen to it from his archives. He was on the Jeff Rentz program March 15, 2010. Ruben and I were on with him that evening. It was a very special evening. And unfortunately, shortly after that, his health took a radical downturn, and he is not doing too well, and
We only have him for a short amount of time.
so, but the other thing that I wanted to note is the level of detail. You know, Jeff Rentz would ask him about something and he would correct him and say, no, actually at that point, the B-47 had moved on to El Paso, and I was told to report back to base. So, I mean, the level of detail also that he gave us throughout our interview sessions with him, the fact that he had in his mind a precise order of events that he was going through, which matches what he told other investigators as far back as the mid-60s. To me, Ruben, indicates that this gentleman, that there is credibility.
Oh, absolutely. We're going to need to be rushing because we only have a short amount of time remaining.
We're not Russians.
We're not Russians. Rushing. So, anyway, but the core of the story goes, and you'll hear later, that on his way back, he got a piece of metal and he put it in his pocket, and later had it retested and found that this metal was not your typical metal found here on Earth. So that's another
All right, so you're standing there with your arms up in your flight suit next to this little private plane, and you're 150 yards away from this crash disk. How many soldiers were there approximately there, and were they deployed in a circle around it, or what?
No, about, I'd say 150 there when I got there.
All right, so quite a
Already.
Mm-hmm.
And about 35 vehicles.
Wow, all right. Could you see the
vehicles on both sides.
All right, could you see the craft itself?
Yeah. I went in there and I talked to this Spanish lieutenant. Anyway, I talked to him, and we walked down through there, and he said, I never seen anything like it before. And I said, no, I haven't either. But I said, this fact's a little different than some I've looked at. This is here has some solid pieces still scattered down through there.
All right, so some of it was intact. Did it have any markings or anything on the exterior, or was it just the skin of it?
Well, no, I picked up a little piece of it on the way out of there.
Well, I know, I want to get there in just a minute. Hold on with that, please. You walk up to this thing. Well, did the Mexicans let you get close to it, or they hold you off a little bit?
No, they held me off till the lieutenant got up there.
All right, and
I don't think they spoke very good English, the rest of them did.
All right. I hope they weren't putting their guns on you all this time.
Well, they haven't pointed that direction.
I get the picture. All right, so the lieutenant gets there. You walk up to the craft itself. How close did you get to it, Colonel?
I walked right up and kicked a piece of it.
Wow. All right. How big was it in diameter? About?
Well, where it hit, there was a lot of small pieces, like 2 foot by 8 inches, maybe 2 foot by 48 inches. There's different pieces off of it, you know.
Okay.
Then it got on up to where it stopped. It looked to me like that it was a piece of 10-inch pipe that was real shiny. And I don't know if that was part of the fuel consumption part of it, or what it was. But he didn't know either, the Mexican business.
Okay, one of the interesting parts of this is he said that he had a chance, just a glimpse, and he was hesitant to tell us about it right away. It came out later. He had a glimpse inside a crack in the hull, in the skin of the ship, and he saw some bodies that were clearly not human. And I think this is the next clip.
Was there any evidence of any life, dead or alive, around that object?
They were on up front, according to them. They said don't look like people, but said we can't let you go up there. The funeral already said no, nobody looked at that.
So
They didn't even let the boys that was guarding it look at it.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay, so the front of the craft that impacted the ground ripped a hole open inside, and apparently people could see in there, and there were dead ETs, or they weren't humans, there were dead bodies in there of some kind.
Right.
And you couldn't get around there to see in there either.
Well, I kind of snuck around with it.
You're a sneaky fellow, aren't you? All right, now Charlie, you snuck around there a little bit, Colonel. What did you see?
Well, it didn't look like human beings to me.
How many of them were there?
I believe there were 3, and the lieutenant said there were 4.
All right.
I never did see the others.
Were the bodies mangled, or were they relatively intact, and what were they dressed in?
Well, they weren't dressed at all.
Okay.
And they were in a lot of different pieces. I didn't see but one that had a complete top. But I wasn't sure what he was either.
All right. What did the head look like? Anything like we've seen in the common research literature, the big eyes, the smooth skin, the little mouth? Did you see anything?
Yeah, there's some of them that look like that. They just, I don't know how you explain it, but they just, their head, arms and stuff, their arms are little bitty. They look like broomsticks.
Wow, okay. But they had... broomsticks. All right, no, I got you. They had no uniform on. They were just basically skin, if that's what their outer covering is.
Yeah.
No, any evidence of blood?
I didn't see any.
Okay, but they were...
Man, I just took the glance in there, because he wouldn't let me go look in it. I just happened to be walking back and looking in there, you know, and he said, "Oh, you can't do that, you gotta come over here."
You're a smart man, I'm glad you did. The colonel actually got a look, listeners, I'm sure you're right on this, of the occupants of that craft, all dead on impact apparently. And we'll come right back. Colonel, stand by if you would please. Get yourself a drink of water. You're doing wonderfully here describing an extraordinary event. We'll come right back with Colonel Robert Willingham in just a couple of minutes.
If you would like to listen to the entire interview, you can go to the Jeff Langus website and go into the archives to listen to that. It was a remarkable evening we spent together with Jeff Rance, Colonel Willingham. And like I say, unfortunately, we've spoken to his caretaker recently, and he's no longer able to verbalize his thoughts. She tells me that she goes there to the room at the Veterans Center where he's currently housed, and she can tell in his eyes that he has a lot he wants to say, but he can no longer express himself coherently.
We basically, both Noe and I, we don't really need to tell you too much, because the colonel here, in his own words, shared his story, so we have to share his story with you in his words. So Noe, you can go on to the next one. Again, the unearthing...
We took together.
Sorry. No, go ahead, Noe. Go ahead, you only have it.
Well, let me just summarize this part of it. He says that he picked up a piece of the wreckage it had this unique characteristics. Mr. Colonel Willingham actually drew these images, or the drawing that you see on the screen, and he said it had these ridges along one side, and then it had these holes, lines of holes, sort of like something that was designed to dispel heat. And this is a piece that obviously had broken off during impact, but the piece itself was fairly undamaged. In other words, the edges didn't show a great deal of deformity.
So we took the number that he had got a hold of it.
So,
Markville, he said everybody flying on his mission. Don't say one word about him.
so anyway, he took the piece of metal in to be analyzed at a lab in Maryland, and then lo and behold, when he called to check back on what the analysis had found, they claimed that they didn't recollect that he had ever been there to drop the metal off, and that the person, because he named the person by name that he gave the metal to, that person had never worked at that facility before, and that they claimed that they had no record and knew nothing of what he was talking about. But what was really interesting, as you'll see in a video clip in a minute, and it'll probably be the last video clip that we'll have time for, he received an anonymous letter years later that he believes, even though it was unsigned, he believes was from the lab technician that ran the analysis on that piece of metal. Oh, and everybody on that flight, in the B-47 and in the F-86s, was forced to undergo a debriefing in which they were told not to ever tell of their UFO encounter, not to ever share with anyone, or they would be, quote, dire consequences. Okay, actually we don't have the clip, but where he talks about the letter that he received, but he received an anonymous letter, which he assumed was from the metallurgist who ran the test, that said he had never encountered anything, and it did not appear to be from Earth.
Oh, these are the other crash sites.
So we mentioned that this story's been around a while. Colonel Willingham had been trying to tell people about it. There was an article in the February and March 1968 edition of Skybook, which was a predecessor to the MUFON Journal.
Yes.
And in it, the article says that pilot R.B. Willingham was leading a squadron of jets near the Mexican border when he was informed that a UFO had crashed on the border, and he went to the site to investigate, but found that Mexican authorities were already there. Now, when was it that the Roswell UFO crash was finally brought out in public with a book by Berlitz? The research had been done by Stanton Friedman. What year was that? Does anybody know?
1980.
1980 was when the book was published. So the Del Rio UFO crash story actually precedes Roswell and was well known to the key UFO investigators at the time in the 60s and early 70s, long before anyone even discussed Roswell, New Mexico. So that's part of the reason that Ruben and I call our book The Other Roswell.
No, any chance going to the Japanese video?
Yeah, I'm going.
Okay.
This was the original, just an excerpt from the original affidavit given by Colonel Willingham in 1977. And once again, the story is identical to what he told us many years later. There was a story, believe it or not, we found, Ruben is the one to thank for this, in January 24, 1978 edition of what was called the Midnight Globe, in which Colonel Willingham tells briefly his story. So this, this was preceding. This story was also covered in the landmark document Retrievals of the Third Kind by Leonard Stringfield, which was published in 1978 also. We found documents statements given to a UFO researcher, which has never been publicly released, the transcripts of his interview with Willingham, his original interview, and it all jives with what we've already told you. Just additional evidence that this story was out there, was well known long before Roswell.
アメリカ男性の写真で UFO が墜落し、その残骸と乗っていた宇宙人の死体が回収されたという。
The irony is that you folks here in Del Rio didn't know about this, yet everyone in Japan knew about it. Back in 1978, they did a UFO documentary about this. So we were very fortunate to find this actual video about the entire case that occurred here with Willingham.
アメリカ男性の写真で UFO が墜落し、その残骸と乗っていた宇宙人の死体が回収されたという事件は、ウィリアムハン大佐は1950年12月まで墜落する UFO を追ってメキシコ。
That must be Del Rio there in Japanese. Does anybody out there know Japanese? No? All right.
アメリカ男性の写真で UFO が墜落し、その残骸と乗っていた宇宙人の死体が回収されたという事件は、ウィリアムハン大佐は1950年12月まで墜落する UFO を追ってメキシコ国境を越え、不時着した巨大な映画を至近距離から見たという。あの日の朝6時半頃でしたから、私は F94 ジェット戦闘機に乗って、我々はその UFO が天国から訪れていることにした。UFO はアビリージの上空を通過して突然直角に関し、国境を越えてメキシコ側へ墜落したのだ。我々はアメリカ側のテキサス州ベルリン市から国境沿いに西へ向かい、アムスタッドダムを経由して最も近い地点から国境を越え現場に向かうことにした。事件当時にはまだできていなかったはずの巨大な貯水池アムスタッドダムが見える。このダムの水門を境にしてアメリカ側とメキシコ側に分かれている。
Okay, we don't have time, unfortunately, to show more of that. Our time is up. But it was very obvious that in 1978, he was telling people about the correct crash location. Now, this is something that the skeptics are saying. You know, he told people the crash location was down in Laredo. He said it was, you know, down around Eagle Pass. He was all over the map with it. No, that's not true. The Willingham story at its core has remained unchanged since the 1950s. We connected with a Japanese UFO researcher who translated the whole clip for us, and everything in the clip jives with what Colonel Willingham said. And let's see. The first clip about the we don't have time for this clip, but if you go to KBFW and look up the text files, they actually did a retrospective on the Del Rio crash on February 27th, 2000. And the Willingham case has just been featured in Timothy Good's outstanding new book called Earth and Alien Enterprise, The Shocking Truth Behind the Greatest Cover-Up in Human History. We collaborated with Timothy, who is one of the world's best-known UFO researchers, and he chose the Willingham case to include in his book because he thinks that it is so powerful. And we close with a cover of Astounding Science Fiction magazine from September 1958. The cover was done by somebody named Martinez, depicting a UFO crash in a small, isolated Mexican village. There are 2 survivors and 1 deceased alien. Spectating are a priest and several villagers. We have enjoyed our time with you, and we've got to make way for George Noe next.
Thank you. Hopefully later on we'll have time to interact with some other questions that you may have about this case and the other presentations. Thank you.